Hello and welcome. So again, I'm indoors for this video. So over the last couple of months, I've been collecting seeds from various suppliers. I love this time of year, not because Christmas is coming, but because I've got time to look through all the seed catalogues and decide what I'm going to be sowing and growing next year. So I keep my seeds in these dirty old boxes here and roughly organised in either families or some sort of group anyway. So I'm just going to go through these seeds and get them sorted. I thought while I'm doing that, I would run through the varieties I have picked out for next year. So I get my seeds from all over the place. It just depends who stocks the varieties I'm interested in. Now, I don't tend to use the mainstream seed merchants, not if I can help it. One that I use really often is Seeds of Italy. They've got some fantastic varieties. Generally speaking, I like the company, and there's plenty of seed in their packets. There are a few others that I use regularly, but I tend to avoid the big suppliers. However, this year, I do have a lot of seed from Mr. Fothergill's, and that's simply because a couple of months ago, they emailed round an offer, lots of seed packets at £1 a packet, and I think there was even free postage. So I went onto their site, and everything that I would have bought somewhere else anyway, I got all of that for £1 a pack from Mr. Fothergill's, so that was great. One company that I tried for the first time last year, and I know this is quite a popular one, is Premier Seeds Direct. Most of their stuff comes in either little foil packets or then these Ziploc bags, and they have quite a large range of seed, and I'd never used them before, and most of their seed is about £1 a pack, and there is a lot of seed in their packs. It's certainly not the case that they're mean with their seed packets. Far from it. And they do have quite a few varieties that I like to grow. I tried them for the first time in this past season, and generally speaking, I was really quite happy, especially looking at value for money. If I order 24 packets of seed from somewhere, I would anticipate there being a slight issue with maybe 1 or 2 of those packs. It would be rare that everything's perfect. And I've used Seeds of Italy for years, but every now and then, even one of their packs has a problem. So I've had some Treviso chicory that's come up with round heads, not many, just a small proportion, and I had a pack of lamb's lettuce that didn't germinate. With Premier Seeds, I had a pack of mustard, red giant mustard. Germination was a bit poor with that one, I think, and I had a pack of Komatsuna that, when it came up, was quite clearly not Komatsuna. It was probably Mizuna. It's okay, but that sort of thing is a little bit annoying. But I think in general, germination was pretty good, and I'm certainly very happy to buy more of their seeds. And I have done where they've got what I'm looking for, and at more or less £1 a pack for most of those seeds. They're really good value for money. Then I've got a few from Real Seeds. They've always got some interesting varieties. I've got some from Simpson Seeds. I use them regularly as well. Anyway, let me begin with, I think, the brassicas. That's the largest collection of plants in the garden. And let's see what I've got. So I'll start with the cabbage, and I do have some red drumhead from last year. I mean, that's an old classic red cabbage. It always does reasonably well, a little bit slow growing. Probably not quite as hardy as some of the other sorts if you're thinking to push them late into the season. I may or may not grow red drumhead next year. I do like red cabbage, but it's not nearly as versatile for me as the other sorts. So I'm kind of in two minds. I could live without that for a season, I think. And I've got my standard go-to cabbage, Copenhagen market. It's a really reliable sort. It's quite compact. They can be planted reasonably close together. I can certainly get 3 of those comfortably across a 4-foot wide bed, which is great. It's pretty quick to heart up. It's an all-round great cabbage. I really do like that one. Always performs well for us. I have a bad habit of sowing too many seed in one batch, and for the coming season I really want to stagger those sowings. So maybe I only need 3 plants at a time, but it would be better if I stagger those by 4 weeks, 5 weeks, maybe even 6 weeks, rather than having 6 in one go. Because when those heads are mature, they don't stand there for week after week. They will eventually split, and that's a pity. So that's my main cabbage for late summer and through the autumn. I do have some seed left of Wheeler's Imperial. I've got some little seedlings in the greenhouse actually, and I may or may not make an early sowing of those next year. Then I'm going to grow Filderkraut again. I haven't grown this for a few years, but this is a fantastic cabbage. Whereas the Copenhagen market is quite quick and quite compact, this is a bit of a monster. The heads can be absolutely enormous. A traditional cabbage from Germany for sauerkraut, and it's wonderful for kraut salad and all those sorts of things. Really fine head. So I'm looking forward to growing that one again. And then I've got a savoy for the winter. I was going to go back to Ormskirk for the next season, but I came across this very pretty looking thing from Seeds of Italy. This is San Michele. I don't know if it will show up on the camera, but you might pick up that there's some lovely pink colouring to this one. That's probably only on the outer leaves, but we shall find out. It's a Savoy, but it doesn't look like the leaves are heavily Savoyed. It's interesting. This is a late variety. I've never grown this before, so that's one of the experiments for next year. But it sure is an attractive looking cabbage. So broccoli and Calabrese. Well, this year I grew Ramoso Calabrese. I'm not sure what to make of that, to be honest. I don't always get great results with the Calabrese. I think the heads on these are fairly small, but it does then go on to give lots of smaller heads. It's not bad, and I've got plenty of seed here, so I will probably sow a few more of those. But I've also got an ordinary green sprouting Calabrese here from Premier Seed, so I'll probably grow a bit of both and see which one does best. Very often I grow Rudolph, the purple sprouting. It's a very early variety, very quick. This year I've just gone for the standard early purple sprouting. I decided actually, I've enjoyed the Rudolph before. I'm not that keen on the broccoli myself, but my wife loves it. And Rudolph has been really good for giving early harvests. But I think this year it was probably a bit too quick. So I thought I would just go back to the standard early purple and see whether I like that one any better. I'm probably not growing turnips this year. Neither of us are particularly keen on them. Sometimes I do, and small turnips can be quite nice raw, but we're not that mad on them. I do grow some Swede. again, it's not something I'm keen on, but there's a Finnish Christmas dish that I prepare with Swede for my wife, and she loves that. So I will certainly have a small number of Swede in the garden, and I've got the old classic best of all this year. Then cauliflower. So this year I tried this variety Jesi. That comes, I think that's from Marche. This is an Italian variety. Conditions weren't perfect. We did get some nice heads from it, but I'm not sure about this variety. So I will probably sow some more of that again. And I've got some all year round, which I've grown many times before, from Premier Seeds, and I will maybe compare the two and see which is doing better. So Kales, we do like the kale actually. There's the Nero di Toscana, of course, the black Tuscan kale. That's old seed, but I'll be growing some more of that again this year. And then I've got the Portuguese kale. I grew that, I think, for the first time this last season. Produced some very nice plants, very large leaves, quite pleasant. So I'll definitely be growing some more of that. And then I was going to get the dwarf green curled. That's one that I commonly grow. But this one caught my eye. This is from Premier Seeds. This is Vates Blue Curled. And I think I will give that a try. I think it's somewhat similar, so that should do nicely. I'll be interested to see how that does. Some years I grow Kohlrabi, some years I don't. This year I've got white Vienna. I usually stick either to the white Vienna or the purple. It's one of those things. It's nice if I get a few, but I'm not that bothered about it. It kind of crops when we've got other things on the go that we like as much as these. So it's one of those crops I can live without, but yeah, sometimes the Kohlrabi is nice, and I will do some white Vienna this year. And then I've got the fantastic Cima de Rapa, and this is something we really do like. So that's also known as rapini or broccoli rab or sprouting turnip tops. So it's a reasonably quick growing plant, and it's grown mainly for the flowers. They're a little bit like a sprouting broccoli, but it's got a slight bitter taste that is quite pleasant actually. Those varieties, although there are a few at least regional sorts, maybe a few named sorts, mostly they're known by the time to harvest. So I've got a quick one here, a 40-day, and I've got a 90-day. So in theory, the slower growing versions will produce larger plants and more substantial heads. It all depends. I think this last season I did have a batch of these, both of these in the ground at the same time, and the 90-day crop, that came in sooner than expected and wasn't that much more substantial than I got from the 40-day. So that was a little bit disappointing, but of course it really does depend on conditions, and that really wanted to flower perhaps a little sooner than it should. This is a cool weather crop ideally, probably not great to sow through the warmer conditions. So I will be sowing this sometime after midsummer, and I'll sow both of these probably at the same time, and that will stagger the harvest. I can get away with a really early sowing of the 40-day Cima de Rapa here. I tried it this year in one of the cold frames. I got those in really early, and they cropped towards the end of April and the very beginning of May. So we were able to harvest those in time for getting the melons into the cold frame. So that worked really well, and I will probably do that once again. Radish is another of those crops we're not too bothered about here. I've got some of the classic French breakfast, and I've got a mouli for later in the season. I'll probably grow a few of those, but not a large amount. And then it's on to the leafy crops. So, of course, there's rocket, which we do like. Sometimes I'll do an early sowing of the rocket, but it does tend to run to seed. I think it works a lot better, again, after midsummer. And that is true also of the Oriental greens. Now, I want to grow a few more of those in the next season than we've done in the past. We've often had a scattering of the Oriental greens, but I quite like to grow a few more of those. And I've got this really bad habit. I never remember what I've ordered from where, so I've doubled up on a few of these somewhat foolishly. But I've got a nice collection of Oriental greens from real seed. So I've got all the classics there. Mizuna, I've got Tatsoi, a white-stemmed Pak Choi, Wong Bok Chinese cabbage. I've got Choi Sum again, Mizuna, Komatsuna, and hopefully this is real Komatsuna and not more Mizuna. And I've got a mustard which I've never heard of before called Nine-Headed Bird. So that one sounds quite interesting, and I look forward to that. Now, most of these Oriental greens, they're best sown to crop during the cool part of the year. So sown sometime after midsummer, and earlier sowings have a tendency to run to seed pretty quickly. But there are a few that you can make a spring sowing with, and I think Komatsuna and Mizuna are reasonably tolerant of some of the warmer conditions. So I'll probably make an early sowing of those. I did make an early sowing of Tatsoi this year, and we kind of got away with it. We were using it as it started to flower, and actually it wasn't a problem that they'd started to flower. The plants weren't huge, but they were really nice, especially early in the season before you get a lot of new greens. So I'm not sure if I will do that again. I might stick to those that are a little better suited to the warmer conditions. Well, that covers it for the brassicas. That's a really substantial portion of the sowing plan in any season. And there are those two main periods of sowing. There's those that I can start early in the year. That will include the Calabrese, cauliflower, the summer and autumn cabbages. And then there's those that I will wait until probably after midsummer, maybe in August even, to begin with those sorts that prefer the cooler conditions. That will include the winter cabbages, as well as lots of the Oriental greens. So another important group of plants is the legumes, the peas and beans. And I've already got broad beans in the greenhouse. They're a few inches tall at the moment, and they will hopefully overwinter okay and give us our first crop. Then I've got 4 varieties that I will sow in the spring. I've got Masterpiece Green Long Pod. This is some seed from last year. We had good results with that, and we always do. That's a fairly reliable sort. I've then got the Crimson Flowered Broad Bean. It would be really nice if this did turn out to be crimson flowered. I had some seed of this from a different supplier, and as soon as the flowers came out, we realized it was the wrong variety. That is really very annoying, but I'm having another go at getting the genuine crimson flowered bean this year. And then we've got 2 of our old favorites, the Sutton, that's a dwarf broad bean, really very productive. It's dead handy, and especially if you're on a windy site. We're not, but we planted these along our fence in front of the young fruit trees. they're not going to get in their way at all, and it sort of used up a dead space, and they crop really very well. And Bunyard's Exhibition, so that is plenty of broad beans. Almost certainly I will grow too many of those. We've still got quite a few in the freezer even now. I did grow a lot of peas last year, 4 or 5 varieties. I'm only growing 2 this year. We tend to pick a few crops where we will have quite a lot of diversity, and there'll be some crops where we'll make our lives a little bit easier by reducing the number of varieties. So this year I'm growing, as I did last year, alderman. That's a really great pea. In fact, those are leftover seed from last season, but they will be fine for the next year. And alderman is a great main crop pea, really tall growing. Certainly it will grow more than 6 feet, and it can do 8 or even 10 feet in height, and it will crop over quite a lot of that height. So you do end up with a really impressive harvest. And then I've got Hurst Green Shaft. Again, that's a really reliable pea. You just can't go wrong with that one. The pods are really good quality, nice sweet peas. So I'm going to just stick with those 2. I grew all sorts of stuff this last year, and we'll just make our life a little bit easier with the peas. So then for the beans, so one of my favourites is this yellow, flat, waxy podded sort. This is Meraviglia di Venezia, and actually this comes in 2 forms. I grew the climbing sort last year, and this year I'm using this for the dwarf bean. So it's essentially the same bean. This is a dwarf form. I do like to have some of those dwarf beans. Sometimes I put them in the polytunnel or the greenhouse and get a slightly earlier crop, or otherwise I'll put them outside. I can either find odd spaces where I can put a few plants, just sort of fill up any gaps. They're quite handy for that. Or then I like them just to give me a crop a little bit quicker than the climbing beans. So it is nice to have a mixture of climbing and dwarf beans. Then I've got the classic cannellini bean. Again, this is a dwarf, and that I will be growing for dried beans. I've then got Blue Lake. That's pretty much a standard green bean, but a very nice one. The bean I really liked from this season, it did really well for us, is the purple podded bean. Now there are lots of varieties that have purple pods now. This is the old classic purple podded. Great flavour, not at all stringy, tender beans, fantastic. So I'm growing those again. That's a climbing sort. And then I've got Borlotti beans. So this past season I grew a dwarf sort, but I've gone back to climbing for this year. This is an old classic Lingua di Fuoco, or tongue of fire. That should do very nicely. And I'm growing those again for the dried beans. And finally, in the legume department, I have an oddity. I've got some peanuts. I'm not growing those for a serious crop, and I may or may not get any crop at all, but they have a very curious fruiting habit. So the flowers form above ground in the normal way, and after they're pollinated, then a stem grows from the center of the flower, and it hangs down towards the ground. That thin stem is known as the peg, and that has to get down to the soil if you're going to get any peanuts, and when it's down to the soil it will then grow down and the peanuts will form underground, which is why they're also known as ground nuts. But it's such a curious sort of flowering and fruiting habit that yeah, it's fun. So I thought I would chuck a couple of those somewhere warm. They'll have to go either in one of the greenhouses or then maybe in the polytunnel. I think they've got a lot better chance of giving me something there than they would in the ground outdoors. But anyway, that is it for the legumes. Now we do grow a few herbs. I've got no new seeds for the herbs. I think I've still got plenty from last year. So we've got a patch outside of the kitchen garden with perennial herbs. So we've got bay, thyme, rosemary. We've got some sage and oregano. I think some mint in that patch. And we use a lot of those. And then for the annual herbs, it's mostly parsley, dill and basil. And just looking through these, I've got plenty of all of those. I do have some coriander as well. I didn't grow any coriander this year. Now we do use it occasionally, but maybe I shall add that into the mix for next season. But otherwise it's more dill, more of the giant Naples parsley. I love that variety. It's a really nice plant, but great big leaves and fantastic flavour. That one is great, more or less year round as well. I mean, it will run to seed from an early sowing, but generally you can keep it going for quite a while. So it only needs a few sowings each year. And then of course, lots and lots of basil for the summer. Right, that is the herbs. So because I've gone a little bit mad with all these new seeds and I've still got stuff left over from last season that I will be sowing next year as well, there's a lot of varieties here. So what I think I'll do is split this video into 2 parts. So that is it for the first part. I'll upload the second part in a few days' time. But anyway, this is pretty much my favourite time of the year, when I get to leaf through the seed catalogues and pick out some interesting varieties. If there's anything interesting you've got planned for next year, drop me a note in the comments. I would appreciate that. But that is all for this video. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.